The dog came out of nowhere. Cars screeched, horns blared, drivers cursed as a large golden retriever darted into the fast lane of Highway 92, dodging traffic like he had a death wish. Morning commuters slammed on their brakes, coffee spilling, tempers flaring, but the dog didn't stop. He didn't slow. He kept running, hard, his paws pounding the asphalt, eyes wild with desperation. And then came the moment that changed everything. A silver pickup swerved too sharply, tires squealing. The truck fishtailed, nearly flipping. The driver, a heavyset man with a red face, slammed his fist on the steering wheel, hanging halfway out the window. "Somebody hit that stupid mutt before he causes a pileup!" he shouted. Several drivers nodded, muttering angrily. Someone actually sped up, angling his bumper as if he planned to nudge the dog out of the road. But the dog didn't even look back. He ran with a purpose, like he was trying to save the world and losing time by the second. That's when a retired schoolteacher named Linda Carver, age 67, rolled down her window and yelled, "Leave him alone! He's scared!" Her voice cracked with the authority of someone who'd spent 40 years controlling school hallways. A few drivers glanced her way, startled. She had the kind of voice people listened to, even if they didn't want to. But the angry man in the truck sneered, "Lady, that dog's gonna get someone killed. Best thing to do is put it down." Linda's jaw tightened. She'd seen plenty of men like him. Loud, pushy, always convinced cruelty was the answer. Before she could argue back, the dog stumbled. Just a tiny misstep, one paw sliding on the lane marker, but enough to make the crowd gasp. He recovered instantly and pushed harder, running faster now, eyes fixed ahead, like he was following an invisible trail. Then Linda saw them. 2 police cruisers in her rearview mirror, lights flashing, sirens off. The officers weren't chasing speeders, they weren't checking for drunk drivers. They were following the dog. One of the officers leaned out, waving at the drivers to move aside. "Clear the left lane! Let him run!" he shouted. People stared. Let him run? Why? What were the police doing following a lone dog down the highway? And then came the moment that made the entire highway fall silent. As the cruiser passed Linda's car, the officer inside, gray-haired, stern-faced, clearly shaken, shouted, "He's trying to show us something." The words hit Linda like a cold wind. Show them something? A dog? But something in the officer's voice, panic, urgency, fear, made her blood run cold. Then the golden retriever let out a sound that didn't belong on a highway. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't a whine. It was a helpless cry, the kind an animal makes when begging humans to understand. Linda had heard that sound once before, decades earlier, when her neighbor's dog tried desperately to get someone, anyone, to follow him to where a child had fallen into an old well. No one listened. That memory still haunted her. Linda slammed her foot on the gas. She wasn't letting history repeat itself. As she sped up, she watched the dog race forward, weaving between lanes. His coat was dusty, his fur matted, tail low with exhaustion. This wasn't some runaway pet. This was an animal on a mission. And then Linda noticed something the others had missed. Every few seconds, the dog glanced over his shoulder, not at the cars, not at the officers, but at the sky. His ears pinned back each time a semi-truck's horn blared, but his eyes always lifted upward, searching for something above the tree line just past the guardrail. Linda frowned. "What are you looking for, sweetheart?" she whispered. The dog suddenly veered off the highway, jumping the concrete divider with surprising grace. He scrambled down the grassy slope, disappearing into a wooded area. The officers hit their brakes. The first cruiser skidded to a stop, the second nearly rear-ended it. Travelers watched in stunned silence as both officers jumped out of their cars and sprinted after the dog, one of them shouting into his radio, "We found him! He's heading toward mile marker 44! Send backup and medics, now!" Medics? Linda's heart dropped. Someone was hurt. Someone the dog was trying to save. Traffic slowed to a crawl. The angry man in the truck was suddenly quiet, his face pale. Linda pulled onto the shoulder and scrambled out of her car, ignoring the blaring horns behind her.
She wasn't young anymore. Her knees complained, her breathing came fast, but she forced herself down the embankment, clutching tufts of grass to keep from slipping. She wasn't letting that dog face the unknown alone, not after what she'd seen in her lifetime, not after how many times people ignored what was right in front of them. Halfway down the slope, she heard branches snapping. One officer shouting, "I see him! Over here!" Linda pushed deeper into the trees, and then she heard it. A sound she would never forget for as long as she lived. The dog barking furiously, followed by the unmistakable cry of a human. Not the cry of someone calling for help, but of someone who couldn't call for help. Linda stumbled forward, clutching a tree for balance, and gasped when she burst through a curtain of branches into a small clearing. The dog stood rigid near a fallen log, barking in frantic spurts. His fur bristled, his body trembling. At first, Linda thought he was barking at the ground, but then she saw it. A pale hand, still, unmoving, sticking out from behind the log. Her knees nearly gave out. Oh, dear God. The two officers reached the log seconds later. One knelt instantly. The other spoke into his radio with trembling urgency. "We found the victim. It's bad. Send everything you've got." Linda covered her mouth, heart hammering, eyes filling. The angry driver from the highway, the commuters who complained, the people who wanted to hit the dog, they were all wrong. So terribly wrong. This dog wasn't a danger. He was a hero. But as the officer pushed aside debris, revealing more of the scene, his face blanched, and Linda realized the truth was far more horrifying than she imagined, because the body behind the log wasn't alone.
The officer's gloved hands froze mid-movement. Linda watched his face drain of color, his eyes widening as though he were staring into something he couldn't quite comprehend. The second officer, a younger man with freckles and a rookie's nervous energy, leaned closer. "Sir, what is it?" The senior officer swallowed hard. "There's more than one." Linda's breath caught. More than one? The golden retriever, muddy, trembling, panting like he'd run for miles, stood protectively in front of the log. His growls softened into low, urgent whimpers as he tried to wedge his nose into the small space beneath it. The officer gently grasped the log and pushed it aside. Everyone gasped. Beneath the fallen trunk, tucked into a shallow depression in the forest floor, lay two children, a boy and a girl. The boy couldn't have been older than 10, the girl maybe 7, her small body pressed against the earth, hair tangled with leaves. Both were pale, alarmingly pale. Dirt streaked their cheeks, their clothes were torn. But worst of all was the stillness. They weren't moving, not even a twitch. "No, no, no," Linda whispered, stumbling forward until the senior officer gently held out a hand to stop her. "Ma'am, please stay back. We don't know their condition." Rex, no, not Rex, she corrected herself. This dog wasn't a police canine. Let out a desperate bark. He nudged the girl's shoulder with his nose, then stepped back, whining, as if pleading for someone to help her. The senior officer dropped to his knees and pressed 2 fingers against the boy's neck. His other hand trembled. Seconds passed like hours. "Faint pulse. He's alive." The rookie exhaled sharply, relief washing over his face. "The girl?" he asked. The officer leaned closer, checking her next. His jaw tightened. His eyes flickered. Fear, hope, disbelief all tangled at once. "She's got a pulse too. Weak, but it's there." Linda felt her knees give out, relief nearly knocking her breath away. She pressed her hand to her chest and whispered a shaky, "Thank God." The dog barked sharply, tail wagging once, as if he understood. Then, suddenly, his demeanor changed. His ears snapped up, his head turned toward the woods behind them. He took 2 steps back, growled low and deep. The officers immediately reached for their holsters. "Whoa," the rookie murmured. "What's he hearing?" The forest around them had gone still, too still. Not a bird, not a rustle, not even wind. The quiet was unnatural, eerie, almost suffocating. Linda shivered. The senior officer spoke into his radio again, voice clipped with urgency. "We need medics and backup at mile marker." A crack echoed from the trees. They all spun. A branch had snapped, loud, quick, intentional.
The dog growled, lowering himself, fur bristling. "Someone's out there," the rookie whispered. Linda's blood ran cold. What if whoever did this is still close? The officers exchanged grim looks. The dog let out another growl, not frightened, but warning them. The senior officer pointed toward the highway. "Carver, get back to your vehicle, now, and stay low." "I'm not leaving those children," Linda protested. "We can't protect you and them at the same time. Go." His voice cracked with authority honed over decades of service. Linda hesitated, torn between fear and instinct. She didn't want to leave, but she wasn't foolish either. The way the dog braced himself told her everything. Whoever hurt these children wasn't far, and they might not want witnesses. Linda crouched and shuffled backward, heart pounding, until she was halfway up the slope again. She ducked behind a tree, peeking through the branches. The dog sniffed the air, nose twitching wildly, eyes fixed on a thick cluster of trees. The officers stood ready. Silence stretched. 1 minute, 2, nothing moved. Then sirens, in the distance at first, faint, then growing louder as ambulances and backup units raced toward the scene. The forest seemed to flinch at the arrival of help. The rookie exhaled shakily. Thank God. But the dog didn't relax, not even for a second. He stood guard over the children, unwavering. When the paramedics finally reached the clearing, they gasped at the sight. 2 stretchers were rushed forward. Medics worked in synchronized motions, checking vitals, fitting oxygen masks, starting IVs. "How long do you think they've been out here?" one paramedic whispered. "Hours, maybe. The boys dehydrated. The girls worse." "Jesus, how did anyone find them?" The senior officer pointed to the golden retriever. "He did." The medics looked at the dog in awe. One patted his head. The dog didn't respond. His eyes were still locked on the woods. Only when the children were carefully lifted onto the stretchers did he break his vigil, following alongside, refusing to leave them, whining softly when they were carried up the slope. Linda emerged from behind the tree. She moved toward the girl's stretcher, tears streaming freely now. "I'm right here, sweetheart. You're safe now." The dog nudged Linda's hand with his muzzle, as if thanking her for not giving up. Officers guided the medics up the embankment toward the waiting ambulances. The dog climbed the hill too, though his legs trembled from exhaustion. But something was wrong. Halfway up, he stopped, stiffened, turned, and stared into the trees. Linda followed his gaze and felt a shiver run through her bones. A figure, tall, dark, motionless, just beyond the shadows of a pine. She blinked once, twice, trying to see clearly, but the figure melted back into the woods, disappearing so silently it made her stomach twist. "Officer," she called, pointing. "There, just there, behind the trees." The senior officer spun around. "Where?" "There, just there, behind the trees." The rookie raced toward the spot, gun drawn, but when he reached the cluster of pines, there was nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing disturbed. The forest stood innocent again. Too innocent. "Probably just your imagination," the rookie said gently. Linda shook her head. "No, I know what I saw." The dog growled again, confirming it. Someone had been watching, and they knew the police had found the children. As the ambulances sped away, sirens wailing, the senior officer turned to the dog. "You led us to them," he murmured, "but something tells me this isn't over." The dog didn't bark. He simply looked down the highway where the ambulance lights faded into the distance. Then he turned back to the woods, ears high, body tense, like he knew the real danger wasn't gone. It was waiting, watching, choosing its next move.
The hospital waiting room buzzed softly with hushed conversations and the sterile hum of fluorescent lights. Nurses in pale blue scrubs brushed aft, their shoes whispering against polished linoleum. Linda sat rigid in one of the plastic chairs, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She hadn't even realized she was still trembling until the dog, now resting at her feet, nudged her shin gently. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice cracking. He laid his head on her shoe, exhausted but alert. Every time a nurse or passing visitor walked too close, his ears perked up. He wasn't sleeping, he was guarding. The doors at the far end of the corridor swung open. 2 officers, Mark and the rookie whose name she finally learned was Jacobs, walked toward her. Jacobs knelt down to stroke the dog's back. "Someone's looking for a name tag," he murmured. Still nothing. Mark cleared his throat. "Linda, the doctors are stabilizing the kids now. It'll be a while before we get a full update." Linda exhaled shakily. "They're alive, though." "Yes," Mark said, "thanks to him." All three glanced at the dog. The golden retriever lifted his head, eyes dark and knowing, as if he understood every word. Linda placed a hand on his fur. "He led us straight to them," she whispered. "He never gave up." Mark nodded. "And that's what worries me." She frowned. "What do you mean?" Mark exchanged a look with Jacobs, one filled with tension. "Dogs don't run miles down a highway for no reason," Mark said quietly. "Whatever happened in those woods, he saw it. Maybe he was trying to get help." Linda's breath hitched. "But those children, they didn't get lost on a hike, did they?" Mark hesitated, then shook his head. "We don't think so." Before Linda could ask more, a doctor in a white coat approached. She stood tall, her expression kind but serious. "You're the woman who found them?" Linda nodded. "Yes. How are they?" The doctor folded her arms. "They're dehydrated, exhausted, covered in bruises, scrapes, and cold exposure symptoms. The girl has mild hypothermia, the boy is severely malnourished." Linda's stomach twisted. But they'll recover." "With time, yes," the doctor said softly. "They're strong. It's a miracle they held on as long as they did." The golden retriever let out a small whine at the word miracle, pressing himself closer to Linda's leg. "The social workers are on their way, and we'll need to ask you some questions soon, both of you." She nodded toward the officers. "Of course," Mark replied. As the doctor walked away, Jacobs rubbed the back of his neck. "Sir, there's something else." Mark sighed. "What now?" "The girl, when she woke up, just for a moment, she said something." Linda leaned forward. "What did she say?" Jacobs hesitated, his freckles paling. "She said, 'We were running.'" Silence swallowed the room. Linda's blood chilled. "Running from who?" "That's just it," Jacobs murmured. "Before I could ask anything else, she lost consciousness again." The dog suddenly lifted his head sharply, ears stiff, nose twitching. A low growl rumbled in his throat. "Easy," Linda whispered, stroking him, but the growl didn't stop. Mark stiffened. "What's he sensing?" "It's a hospital. Could be anything." "Not like that," Mark murmured. "Listen to him." The dog rose to all fours, tail low, hackles lifting. He stared down the hallway where a set of double doors swung slowly back and forth, as if someone had just passed through. Mark placed a hand on his holster. Jacob swallowed hard. "You think whoever was in the woods could have followed them here?" "I don't know," Mark's voice turned low, "but I'm not ruling anything out." The dog barked once, sharp and urgent. A nurse popped her head out of a nearby room. "Everything all right?" Mark nodded politely, but his eyes didn't leave the hallway. "Just checking something." The dog's growl grew deeper. Then, footsteps, slow, heavy, approaching. Linda tensed, clutching her purse. A tall man in a maintenance uniform appeared around the corner, pushing a cart of cleaning supplies. The dog sprang forward, barking violently, teeth bared. The man jumped back, startled. "Whoa, easy, boy." Mark held up a hand. "Sir, stop right there." What's going on?" the man stammered. "I'm just doing rounds." Jacobs moved to check the man's ID badge. "Maintenance, yeah, badge scans, looks legit." The dog continued growling, tail rigid. Linda knelt beside him, whispering, "Honey, what are you trying to tell us?" The dog's growl softened, but he never took his eyes off the man. The janitor shook his head. "I don't know why he's acting like that. I haven't done anything. Maybe he smells chemicals or blood." Mark didn't answer. He watched the dog with narrowed eyes. But after a tense few seconds, the dog backed down. He returned to Linda's side, sitting heavily, like the adrenaline had drained out of him. The janitor exhaled in relief and hurried away. Jacob scratched his head. "Dogs can get spooked, right? That happens." Mark didn't look convinced. "Not this one." Before anyone could say more, a woman in a dark blazer entered, her expression tight, determined. "Are you the officers who found the children?" "Yes," Mark replied. The woman flashed a badge, Child Protective Services. "I'm here to get their names, ages, possible family contacts, anything they said before losing consciousness." Linda stood up. They were alone, freezing, barely breathing. Why would anyone leave them like that? The CPS worker sighed heavily. "That's what we need to find out." Mark crossed his arms. "We don't believe they were abandoned." "Neither do I," the worker said. "The girl has wrist bruises that don't match a fall, and the boy—" She hesitated. "The boy what?" Linda pressed. The worker lowered her voice. "The boy has rope marks around his ankles." Linda felt physically ill. "They were tied up?" she whispered. "It appears so." The dog let out a mournful whine, laying his head in Linda's lap again. "That poor child," murmured she. The CPS worker nodded. "We'll need to investigate their home situation immediately, if they even have one." Jacobs frowned. "But no one's reported 2 missing kids?" "That's the strange part," the worker said. "No missing persons reports matching their descriptions." Linda felt cold inside. "So no one's looking for them?" "No one legitimate," Mark said quietly. They all fell silent. Then the dog lifted his head sharply again, ears twitching, nose working overtime, eyes focused on the entrance doors. Linda tightened her grip on his collar. "What is it now?" she whispered. The dog stood slowly, staring, unblinking. Someone had entered the hospital, someone whose scent made the dog's entire body tense, someone he recognized. Mark's hand hovered near his firearm. He followed the dog's gaze and saw a man standing at the far end of the lobby, tall, still, watching them, watching the dog. The moment the man realized he'd been noticed, he turned and walked away, fast. Mark muttered, "Jacobs, go." Jacobs sprinted after him. The dog barked furiously, tail stiff as steel. Linda felt her heart slam against her ribs. "Mark," she whispered. "Who was that?" Mark's jaw clenched. "I don't know." But in his eyes was something far worse than uncertainty. Recognition, not of the man, but of the moment. "I do know," he said quietly, "that we just found the children." He looked toward the doors the man disappeared through. "Now we need to find out who wanted them gone." Jacobs sprinted through the automatic doors and into the parking lot, his radio bouncing at his hip. The late afternoon sun glared off windshields, making it hard to see, but the man in the dark jacket was already halfway across the lot, weaving between cars with sharp, practiced movements. "Sir, stop!" Jacobs shouted. The man didn't look back. Inside the lobby, the golden retriever barked wildly, straining against his collar. Linda struggled to hold him, her feet sliding on the tile. "Mark, he's gonna break loose!" she cried. Mark didn't answer. He was already running. He burst through the hospital doors just as Jacobs rounded the corner near a row of ambulances. "I've got him in sight," Jacobs yelled. But something felt off, way off. The fleeing man didn't move like someone scared. He moved like someone trained, someone who had run from police before, someone who knew exactly how long it would take them to catch up and how to slip away. Linda stood at the entrance, heart pounding, watching through the glass as the officers chased him. The dog whined, pacing anxiously, wanting to run after them but unable to. He pressed his nose to the glass, breath fogging the surface, tail rigid with fear. "He knows that man," Linda whispered. "He knows him." As the man reached the far end of the lot, he suddenly cut sharply left, disappearing behind a large construction dumpster. Jacobs followed close behind, out of breath but determined. "Stop!" Jacobs shouted again. "I said stop!" He rounded the corner and froze. There was no one there, just an empty alley between the dumpster and a concrete wall. "Where?" Jacobs muttered, spinning around, confused. Mark arrived seconds later, gun drawn. "Jacobs, where is he?" He was just here, sir. He turned this corner, I swear he—" The golden retriever's bark echoed faintly from inside the lobby. Deep, urgent. Mark felt a chill run through him. Something wasn't right. He stepped forward cautiously, eyes scanning the shadows.
The scent of engine oil and trash filled the air. A cold wind rustled papers across the pavement. Then Jacobs pointed at the ground. "Sir, look!" Mark crouched beside the footprints in the dust. Only a few steps. The trail stopped abruptly, like the man had vanished into thin air. Or climbed. Mark looked up. Emergency ladders, drain pipes, and a narrow ledge ran along the side of the building. Too narrow for most people to notice, but not too narrow for someone desperate. "He's trained," Mark muttered. "Knows how to disappear." Jacobs caught his breath. "Do you think he's the father?" "No," Mark said simply. "Then who?" Mark didn't answer. He was thinking about the look in that man's eyes. Cold, alert, focused, not on the officers, but on the dog, as if the dog recognized him, or worse, witnessed something. Back inside, Linda paced anxiously, pressing her hand to her mouth. The dog sat rigid, shaking with nerves, ears twisting toward every sound. Finally, the automatic doors opened, and Mark and Jacob stepped inside. They looked shaken. "Did you get him?" Linda asked. Mark shook his head. "We slipped him." The dog whined, pressing into Linda's leg for comfort. "Who was he?" she whispered. "We're not sure, but I know this. He wasn't just some guy passing through. He came here for a reason." "A reason related to the children?" Linda said softly. "Yes, and possibly related to why they were left out there." Linda took a shaky breath. "But why would anyone hurt two innocent kids? Why dump them in the woods?" Mark hesitated, glancing toward the pediatric wing. "We're gonna need answers," he whispered, "and I think those answers start with them." Hours later, after the sun set and the hospital quieted, the doctors allowed one visitor at a time. The girl, who looked no older than 9, was awake now, her small body half buried under warm blankets. Her eyes were still glassy, hollow from exhaustion. Linda stepped quietly into the room. The dog followed, paws soft on the linoleum. The girl looked at him first, her eyes widened, trembling. You came back," she whispered. The dog wagged his tail slowly and walked to her bedside, resting his chin on the mattress. The girl's lips quivered. "I knew you'd find help." Linda sat carefully beside her. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" The girl hesitated, like the question itself was dangerous. "Lila," she whispered. "And the little boy?" Linda asked gently. "Is he your brother?" Lila nodded, tears filling her eyes. "His name's Jonah." Linda swallowed hard. "Lila, honey, what happened to you out there?" Lila shut her eyes tight, shaking her head. I can't say." "You're safe now," Linda assured her. But the girl's fragile voice cracked. "He'll come," she whispered. "He'll come for us if he finds out we're alive." Linda's heart stopped. "Who will?" Lila's small hand gripped the dog's fur. "The man with the tattoos." Linda felt a cold breath move through the room. "Was he the one who hurt you?" Lila nodded. "He said if we talked, he'd come back. He said he'd always find us. He had a mark on his hand, a circle with 2 lines. Linda blinked. "A symbol?" "Yes," Lila whispered. "And they had others with him. They were looking for us even when we hid." Linda felt her stomach twist into knots. "Why was he after you?" But Lila only shook her head. "I don't know. They just kept saying we saw something we shouldn't have." Linda's breath caught. "What?" Lila looked up slowly. Her eyes were full of a fear older than her age. "The cabin," she whispered. "We saw them at the cabin, and they saw us." The dog pressed closer to her, giving a soft, reassuring whine. Linda leaned in, voice low. "What did you see at the cabin?" Lila's answer was barely more than air. "A man who wasn't supposed to be alive." Linda froze. "What?" Lila sobbed silently. He was tied to a chair, bleeding. They said no one would ever find him. She covered her face with trembling hands. But Jonah and I did. Linda felt her heart race. The dog growled softly. And then, the room door cracked open. Mark stepped in, brows knit with concern. "You okay in here?" Linda nodded weakly. "Mark, we need to talk." He stepped closer. "What is it?" She looked him dead in the eye. "There's more going on than 2 lost kids." Mark glanced at the trembling girl, and at the dog, and at the symbol Lila shakily drew on a hospital napkin. A circle, with 2 vertical lines. Mark's breath stopped. He knew that symbol. Everyone on the force did. It belonged to a group far more dangerous than kidnappers. And if the children had seen them, then they were in more danger than anyone realized. Mark raised his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Daniels," he quieted. "I need immediate backup at County General and put out an alert, code red." "Copy, Daniels. What's the threat level?" Mark's eyes moved to the little girl gripping the dog like a lifeline. He exhaled. High. Very high.
The hospital felt different after midnight. Quieter, darker. The kind of darkness that made every small sound feel amplified. The hum of fluorescent lights, the distant beeping of monitors, the soft creak of air ducts shifting. Mark stood outside the pediatric room with his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the elevator at the far end of the hallway. He'd called in additional officers, positioned them at each entrance, and ordered the hospital security team to lock down all non-essential access points. But even with the extra manpower, something gnawed at him. This wasn't a typical case. This wasn't even close. Behind him, inside the dimly lit room, Linda sat beside Lila's bed, gently smoothing the girl's hair as she slept. The dog lay curled up on the floor, head resting on his paws, but eyes open, vigilant. He hadn't closed his eyes once since arriving. He was guarding her. And that alone told Mark more than any forensic report ever could. The boy, Jonah, was asleep in the room next door, still under sedation. The doctors said he'd recover physically, but emotionally, that was a different story. Mark rubbed his face with both hands. He needed a break, a breath, something to clear his mind. But instead, his radio crackled. "Daniels, this is Unit 3. Perimeter is secure." "Copy," Mark replied. Another voice followed. "Unit 6 here. Parking garage clear." "Copy." Then a third voice, tinged with tension. "Daniels, I've got a civilian asking questions down here at the south entrance. Claims he's a family member." Mark stiffened. "What's his name?" he asked. "Won't give one. Looks nervous. Says he's here for his niece." Mark's heart dropped into his stomach. A niece. He glanced through the window at Lila. This was too soon, too coordinated. "Detain him," Mark snapped. "Do not let him into the building. I'm on my way." "Copy that." Mark turned to Linda. "Stay with her. Don't let anyone in this room except me or Officer Jacobs." Linda nodded, though worry darted across her face. "Is it them?" "It's someone who knows these kids are here. That's enough." The dog lifted his head, ears pricked. He sensed the tension, too. Mark squeezed Linda's shoulder and rushed down the hallway, boots echoing on the tile floor. Outside the south entrance, 2 officers had a man in a puffy jacket stop near the glass doors. He looked mid-40s, unshaven, jittery. His eyes darted back and forth as Mark approached. "What's going on here?" Mark demanded. The man pointed at the officers. "They're telling me I can't see my niece. I drove 3 hours to get here." "What's her name?" Mark asked. Lily, he stammered. "Lily Harris." Wrong. The girl's real name was Lila Ray. She'd given it herself, and she'd been terrified to say it aloud. Mark stepped closer, studying his face. No tattoos, no visible markings, but there was something off. His hands were shaking, not with grief or fear, but with adrenaline. "Sir," Mark said calmly, "you're going to need to provide identification." The man swallowed hard. "My wallet's in my truck." "Then go get it," Mark said, nodding to the officers. "We'll follow you." That's when it happened.
The man bolted. He sprinted across the sidewalk, slipping between two parked cars. "Stop!" Mark shouted. The officers gave chase, but the man leapt a low hedge and dashed toward the tree line bordering the hospital grounds. Mark's chest burned with frustration. Why run? Why show up here at this exact time? Because someone sent him, and whoever sent him already knew the children were alive. Back inside, Linda kept watch over Leela as she slept. Every few minutes, the girl whimpered, her small body trembling from nightmares. Linda gently laid a hand on her arm, whispering soft reassurances. "You're safe now, sweetheart. You're safe." The dog shifted suddenly, ears pricked toward the hallway. He stood up stiffly, body alert. "What is it, boy?" The dog moved closer to the door, nose sniffing the crack at the bottom. Second later, there was a soft sound. A footstep. Not running, not rushing. Slow, careful, like someone trying not to be heard. Linda felt her heart climb into her throat. She stepped to the door and peered through the vertical window. Nothing, just the empty hallway, its lights buzzing faintly. She reached for the door handle, and the dog barked, low and warning. Linda froze. That bark wasn't fear, it was a message. Someone's there. She stepped back from the door, pulse racing. "Mark?" she whispered, but no voice answered. Downstairs, Mark returned to the lobby, breathless and frustrated. The suspect had disappeared into the woods, same as the man earlier, same pattern, same training. He ran to the elevator. As the doors closed, his radio crackled. "Daniels, checking in. Everything quiet on the upper floors." "Copy," Mark said, but unease prickled at him. He didn't believe in coincidences. Not anymore. When he reached the pediatric floor, the hallway felt too quiet, too still. He walked slowly toward Leela's room, hand resting on his holster. Linda opened the door before he reached it. Her face was pale. "Mark," she whispered, "someone was out here. Did you see them?" "No, but the dog, he knew, he heard something." The dog stood beside her, body rigid, staring toward the far end of the hallway. Mark stepped past her, motioning for silence. He raised his radio to his shoulder. "Unit 12, status on the east stairwell." No answer. He tried again. Nothing. "Jacobs," he called. Silence. That's when he heard it. Footsteps. Not close, but echoing faintly from the emergency stairwell door. Fast footsteps. Running. Mark drew his gun and sprinted toward the stairwell. He shoved the door open and saw someone disappear down the steps, moving fast, their dark clothing blending with the shadows. "Stop!" Mark shouted. The person didn't stop, didn't even slow. 3 floors down, the stairwell door slammed shut. Mark burst through it and nearly collided with Jacobs. "Sir," he wheezed, "I heard someone running." "He went that way," Mark said, pointing. Both officers stormed down the hallway in pursuit, but where they expected to see a fleeing suspect, they found only an empty corridor and a window just barely cracked open. A cold wind whistled through it. "He got out," Jacob said. "No," Mark said. "He escaped." Back upstairs, Linda stood at the foot of Leela's bed, heart pounding as she tried to stay calm. She brushed a stray tear from the girl's cheek. "You're safe, honey. We won't let anything happen to you." Leela stirred, eyes fluttering open. She looked up at Linda with fear. "Did he come?" Linda froze. "Who?" Leela swallowed hard. "The man with the circle, the one who said he'd never stop looking." Linda crouched down, her voice steady but trembling beneath. "No, sweetheart, he didn't get in." Leela glanced toward the dog. "He's scared too," she whispered. Linda's throat tightened. The dog wasn't scared. He was preparing. With a sudden tremble in her voice, Leela whispered, "If they found us once, they'll find us again." Linda wrapped her arms around the girl, holding her close. "No," she whispered fiercely, "we won't let that happen." But some part of her knew this was far from over, and whoever those men were, they were getting closer.
The sun was rising by the time Mark reached the precinct. A pale orange glow crept across the parking lot, but the new day brought no comfort, not after the night they'd had. 2 attempted intrusions, 1 confirmed sighting of a man claiming to be a relative, 1 mysterious organization Leela hinted about, and 1 dog who hadn't stopped pacing since. Mark stepped inside the station, the smell of burnt coffee and old paperwork greeting him like an old friend. Sergeant Collins looked up from her desk, brows knitting the moment she saw him. "You look like hell," she said. "Feel worse," answered Mark. He placed the file in front of her, the one containing the photos, the kids' names, the statements he'd collected. Collins flipped it open. As she read, her expression tightened. 2 kids running down a highway in the middle of the night, she murmured. No identification, malnourished, exhausted, scared. And now strange men showing up at the hospital? Not just strange, trained, efficient. They slipped past patrol and hospital security like they rehearsed it. Collins leaned back in her chair and exhaled. This doesn't smell like a family custody dispute. No, Mark agreed. It smells organized. He hesitated before adding softly, and it smells dangerous. Collins rubbed her forehead. What about the kids? Did they say anything useful? Mark thought of Leela's trembling voice, the way she slipped into silence every time something frightened her, the cautious glance she gave before she spoke. She said a name or a title, something about a man with a circle. A circle? That's all she said. Collins frowned. You think it's a tattoo? A symbol? A badge? Possibly, he sighed. She also said he promised he'd never stop looking. That got Collins' full attention. Never stop, she repeated. That sounds like more than a threat. That sounds like a vow, Mark finished. A personal one. The room fell silent. Back at the hospital, Linda sat by Jonah's bed as the boy gradually awoke. His breathing was uneven, and his hands twitched with every dream he escaped from. When his eyes finally opened, they darted around the room, wide and fearful. "Where's Leela?" "She's safe," Linda said gently. "She's in the room next door. The police are watching over you both." Jonah shook his head fiercely. No, you don't understand. You can't protect us. Nobody can protect us." Linda leaned closer, keeping her voice calm. "Jonah, sweetheart, you're safe now." "No," he insisted, voice cracking. "They're everywhere. They watch everything. They follow the rules. The circle doesn't lose people." Linda felt her blood run cold. "The circle?" she repeated softly. Jonah clutched the edge of the blanket, knuckles whitening. "That's what they call themselves, the circle, because everyone who joins can't leave, and everyone inside it never gets out." His voice quivered as he added, "And everyone outside gets hurt." Linda swallowed thickly. "Who are they, Jonah? What do they want with you and your sister?" The boy met her eyes, and the terror inside them was unmistakable. "They want us to replace the ones who ran. They need kids, kids who won't be found, kids nobody will miss." Linda's heart felt like it stopped. "Replace?" she echoed. "Replace who?" The boy shut his eyes, breathing shaky. Tears squeezed from the corners of his eyes. "The ones who ran," he whispered. "They ran, so the circle came for us." "And your parents? Where are they?" Jonah flinched violently. After a long silence, he whispered, "They didn't run fast enough." Linda pressed a hand to her mouth, tears brimming. Dear God, this was bigger, darker than anyone understood yet. Mark returned to the hospital as soon as he received Linda's call. When he entered the pediatric unit, the dog stood at the end of the hallway, stiff and unmoving like a sentry. "It's been like that for 15 minutes, the nurse whispered, just staring, listening. The dog turned his head only when Mark approached. "What is it, bud?" Mark murmured, kneeling. The German shepherd sniffed the air, then let out a low growl, barely audible. Not fear, warning. Mark stood and hurried into Jonah's room. Linda was sitting in a chair, hands clasped tightly, eyes red.
Jonah was curled up on the bed, rocking slightly. "What happened?" Mark asked, closing the door. Linda wiped a tear. "He told me everything he could." Mark listened carefully as Linda repeated Jonah's description of the circle: a disappearance ring, trafficking, recruitment, punishment, replacement, a machine built on secrecy, a machine that lost something vital. Leela and Jonah weren't random runaways. They were assets, property, and someone wanted that property back. Mark felt sick, but he forced himself to stay focused. "Jonah, I need you to tell me something important." Jonah didn't lift his head. "Did you run away from one man or from a group?" Jonah swallowed hard. "A group," he whispered. "But one man was in charge, the one with the circle on his arm." Mark exchanged a glance with Linda. A tattoo, a symbol, a badge. Jonah's trembling increased. "If he sees me, he'll take me back, he'll take Leela, and he'll hurt anyone who stops him." Mark knelt beside the bed, placing a gentle hand on the railing. "Jonah, look at me." The boy hesitated, then slowly lifted his gaze. "I promise you," Mark said, quietly, firmly, "that man will not get to you. Not here, not ever again." Jonah didn't believe him. Mark saw it in his eyes, but he needed the boy to feel at least a sliver of safety. "We will stop him," Mark said again. "We will stop all of them." Jonah hugged his knees tighter, but whispered, "You don't know the circle. They always find us." Mark stepped out into the hallway with Linda close behind. "Mark," she said, voice trembling, This is beyond anything we've seen." "I know," he said, running a hair through his hair. "But if kids are being taken, if there's an organized ring, we need federal involvement. I'm calling the FBI." Linda nodded, relief and fear mixing in her expression. But as Mark reached for his phone, the dog suddenly barked, loud, sharp, urgent. Both of them spun toward the end of the hallway. The emergency stairwell door was open, just an inch, just enough. Mark's pulse hammered. He unholstered his gun. "Get back in the room," he told Linda. She didn't move. "Linda, now." She obeyed, slipping back inside as Mark moved toward the stairwell, the dog at his side. Every step echoed. Every breath felt like a countdown. He pushed the stairwell door open and saw something taped to the concrete wall. A small piece of paper, a circle drawn on it, one single line underneath. "We found them." Mark's blood froze. He ripped the paper down and backed up the stairs fast. They hadn't broken into the hospital. They hadn't needed to. They were already inside.
Mark stormed back into the pediatric ward with the paper clenched in his fist, his pulse slamming like a hammer against his ribs. Linda stepped out of the kids' room the second she saw him, fear flashing across her face. "What happened?" she whispered. He opened his hand and showed her. A single symbol, a circle, drawn with a thick, deliberate line, no message, no signature, nothing except the chilling certainty behind it. "They were here," Mark said, "inside the hospital." Linda's breath hitched. No, that's impossible. We have officers on every floor." "They didn't come through a checkpoint," Mark said. "They slipped in before the lockdown. They're watching, they're waiting, and they wanted us to know." Linda pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "Mark, what are we going to do?" "First thing," he said, "we're moving the kids, now." He opened the door to Jonah's room. The boy sat upright, hugging his knees, eyes wide with terror. Rex stayed pressed against the bed, a stiff guardian refusing to rest. Leela was now awake too, rubbing her eyes, sensing something was wrong even before anyone spoke. Mark crouched at their level. "Listen to me," he said gently. "We're going somewhere safe, somewhere no one can find you. I'll be right beside you the whole time." But Jonah shook his head violently. "No place is safe," he whispered. "They always find us. They know how to watch. They know how to listen." Leela's small hand reached over, touching her brother's. "Jonah, maybe this time will be different." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue either. Mark lifted his radio. "All units, this is Officer Daniels. Prepare for immediate transfer of protected minors. Full escort." Static crackled. Then a reply. "Copy that, Daniels. Vehicles ready." Mark stood. "Let's move." Linda wrapped a blanket around Leela's shoulders as she guided the children toward the hallway. A pair of officers joined them, forming a protective barrier with their bodies. Rex walked ahead, nose low, muscles coiled, ready for anything. As they moved toward the elevator, Jonah tugged on Mark's sleeve. "They're waiting outside," he whispered. "They always wait outside." "Not today," Mark said, but even as he said it, a familiar dread twisted in his gut. The hospital's underground garage was cold and dim. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across concrete pillars. 3 police SUVs sat idling, doors open, officers scanning the space with hands on their weapons. "Daniels," Sergeant Collins called, striding toward him, bulletproof vest strapped on. "We're taking them to Safe House 12, underground, off-grid. No one except 5 people in this department even knows it exists." "Good," Mark said. "We'll keep them there until the FBI arrives." Collins nodded sharply. "Let's move." He opened the back door of the lead SUV. Linda lifted Leela in first, then Jonah. Mark leaned in. "You listen to Rex," he said quietly. "He'll stay with you. He'll protect you." Jonah shook his head shakily. Rex hopped into the back and sat between the kids, his body blocking the door, big brown eyes scanning every movement. Then, a sharp crack echoed through the garage. Everyone froze. Another crack, then a thunderous boom. Collins spun toward the ramp. "Smoke grenade!" A thick cloud rolled in, swallowing the lower end of the garage in seconds. "Positions!" Mark shouted, grabbing Linda and pulling her behind a pillar. Officers drew their weapons, scanning the haze. Footsteps echoed. Multiple. Fast. Controlled. "They're here," Jonah cried from inside the SUV. "They're coming." Mark raised his weapon. "Collins, get the vehicle out of here." "We're boxed in," she yelled back. "Ramp's covered." Rex barked, a deep, furious sound that echoed off the concrete. Silhouettes appeared in the smoke. 3, 4, 5. No faces, no hesitation, just purpose. Then one of them called out, voice muffled but unmistakably calm. "Hand over the children." Mark's stomach turned. He stepped out from behind the pillar, gun raised. Not a chance. The man moved closer, enough that Mark could see the symbol stitched into the black fabric of his sleeve. A circle. "We don't want blood," he said. "Just the kids. You're not getting them." The smoke shifted just enough to reveal a second figure circling around the far side of the SUV. Collins fired a warning shot. "Back off." Instead of retreating, the masked figure lifted something, a vial. Before anyone could react, he smashed it on the floor. A hiss filled the air. Gas, not lethal, but enough to disorient. Rex barked again, slamming his paws against the SUV window, frantic. Mark knew he had seconds. "Go," he shouted to Collins. "Drive." She didn't question it. She dove into the driver's seat and slammed the locks down. The SUV roared forward, straight through the smoke, straight toward the ramp. The masked men moved to intercept, but Rex lunged at the window, snarling, and they instinctively stepped back. The SUV spun, tires screeching, and barreled toward the exit. Mark sprinted after it, but then one of the masked men leapt toward him from the smoke. Mark barely dodged the blow, grappling with the attacker, trying to wrench away the weapon in the man's hand. "You can't keep them," the man hissed. "They belong to us." Mark punched him in the jaw and ripped the mask halfway off. Underneath, a tattoo, a circle, marked into the skin like a brand. The man smiled coldly. "You can't stop us. The circle never breaks." Mark shoved him backward and ran for the SUV, but it was already on the ramp, speeding away. The masked men scattered into the smoke, retreating just as silently as they had arrived. Then they were gone, just like that, leaving nothing behind but the echo of their footsteps, the smell of burned fumes, and the symbol burned into Mark's mind. Mark stumbled outside just in time to see the SUV disappear onto the main road, escorted by 2 patrol cars. Linda emerged behind him, coughing from the gas, tears streaming down her face. "Are they safe?" she cried.
"They're safe," Mark said, though his voice shook. "For now." "But they found us," she whispered. "They found us so fast." Mark put a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't just a chase anymore," he said. "It's a war." Linda swallowed hard. "You're going after them, aren't you?" Mark nodded slowly. "They won't stop, so neither can I." He looked out at the road, his jaw tightening. "The circle doesn't break," he muttered. "We'll see about that." Rex trotted up beside him, chest still heaving from the chaos, eyes sharp. Mark placed a hand on the dog's head. "Ready to hunt, boy?" Rex barked once, a deep, certain sound. The beginning of war.
The night swallowed the sky as Mark stood under the buzzing hospital lights, Rex at his side, both of them staring toward the road where the SUV had disappeared minutes earlier. The cold wind cut across the parking lot, but Mark barely felt it. His pulse was still racing from the attack, his mind replaying with masked intruder's words. "The circle never breaks." "We'll see about that," he muttered again, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Behind him, Linda steadied herself against the wall, still shaking from the gas attack. "Mark, whoever they are, they knew exactly where to find us. That means they knew where the kids were the whole time." Mark nodded grimly. "Which means someone inside this city, maybe inside our own system, is feeding them information." Linda's eyes widened. "You think it's a leak?" "I think," Mark said, staring into the darkness, "this is bigger than any of us realized." A soft whine broke the silence. Rex nudged his hand. The dog's ears were stiff, his muscles tight, his gaze fixed not toward the road, but toward the woods behind the hospital. Mark frowned. "Rex, what is it?" The shepherd took 3 deliberate steps forward, then another. Then he barked once, sharp and urgent. Linda startled. "Is someone out there?" "Not someone," Mark said, voice low. "Something." Rex pulled at the leash. Mark hesitated for half a second. Every instinct told him to get in a patrol car and head straight for the kids' safe house. But Rex wasn't wrong. Not once in 5 years had the dog misread danger. Whatever was out there mattered, maybe even more than the chase. "Linda," he said without looking back, "get back inside, stick with the officers, lock the doors." "What about you?" "I'm following him." "Mark, be careful." He nodded once, then he unhooked Rex's leash. "Go." The dog bolted toward the tree line, paws thundering across the grass. Mark sprinted behind him, his breath puffing white in the cold air. Branches snapped underfoot as they pushed deeper into the wooded area, leaving the hospital's glow behind. Within minutes, they were swallowed in darkness. Mark slowed his pace, flashlight in hand, scanning left to right. "Easy, boy, easy." Rex stopped suddenly. Every hair on his back stood straight. He growled, a low, vibrating warning. Mark raised his gun. "What do you see?" For a moment, nothing moved. Then, a faint metallic click echoed from deeper in the trees, followed by a whisper of movement. Someone was out there, someone watching. Mark's voice dropped into a command. "Show yourself." Silence. Then a man's voice answered, calm, steady, disturbingly familiar. "You should have stayed out of this, Daniels." The shadow shifted. A figure stepped into the moonlight filtering through the branches. An uniformed airport officer, Officer Grant. Except he wasn't smiling like usual. His eyes were cold, calculated. Beneath his sleeve, a glimpse of ink. A circle. Mark felt his stomach twist. "You," he said, "you've been helping them." Grant shrugged. "The circle has eyes everywhere. Airports, hospitals, courts. Some of your own brothers in blue. You didn't really think you could whisk those kids away and hide them, did you?" Rex growled louder, baring his teeth. "Relax, mutt. I'm not here for them." He tapped the side of his head. "They've already been retrieved." Mark froze. "You're lying." "Oh, I'm not," Grant said, stepping closer, boots crunching leaves. The
The second your SUV left the hospital, another unit intercepted it. Impossible. Collins would never. Grant cut him off. It wasn't Collins in the driver's seat anymore. A cold chill ripped up Mark's spine. What did you do to her? Grant laughed softly. She's alive, for now, but she won't be if you try to play hero again. You son of a... Grant raised his hand, not in defense, but in warning. Don't. You're outnumbered, outplayed, and out of time. This is your last chance to walk away. Forget the kids, forget the case. The circle rewards loyalty and destroys those who resist. Mark stepped forward, gun raised. Here's my last chance for you. Tell me where they took them, or I swear. Grant lifted something from his pocket. Not a gun, a phone. He tapped the screen and held it out. A live video feed appeared. A warehouse, dark, cold, concrete floors. Two small figures tied to chairs, Jonah and Lila. Lila was crying silently. Jonah wasn't. His face was blank, empty, like he'd surrendered hope. Mark's heart twisted so violently he could barely breathe. Let them go, he demanded, voice shaking with fury. They're children. Grant tilted his head. Children born from the wrong people, and that makes them valuable. Valuable for what? Grant smiled, a sick, soulless curl of the lips. That's not for you to know. Mark lunged forward, but Grant stepped back with surprising speed, raising a small remote. Come closer, and this detonator goes off. Mark froze. A bomb? Grant wiggled the device. Let's just say the people watching this feed won't hesitate to erase evidence if you push too hard. Rex barked, ears flattened, ready to leap. Grant pointed the gun at the dog. I shoot him first. Mark's blood boiled. You shoot that dog and you die before you hit the ground. Grant smirked. Hard to do when the whole forest will be on fire. He pressed a button. A flare shot into the sky, exploding above the treetops with a blinding flash. Grant stepped backward into the shadows. That's my ride. You get one chance, Daniels. Walk away. Then he disappeared into the darkness like he'd never been there at all. Mark stood paralyzed, rage turning his pulse into thunder. Rex pressed against his leg, whining softly, nudging him as if to say, "Don't break, not now." Mark sank to one knee, gripping the dog's fur, trying to breathe through the wave of helplessness. They've got the kids. They've got them. The trees around him crackled with the fading echo of the flare. They're baiting me, he said. They want me to panic. They want me to make mistakes. Rex nudged him again, firmer this time. Mark swallowed hard. You're right. No breaking. Not now. He stood, not a single tremor left in his voice. We hunt. Rex barked, a deep, powerful sound. We track every step, every trail, every scent. The dog barked a third time, loud, sharp, certain. Mark clenched his fists. The circle thinks they can hide in shadows? He glanced toward the distant warehouse shown in the video, then back into the forest where Grant vanished. Then we burn their shadows down. With Rex leading the way, they disappeared into the night, not running away, but running towards war. And this time, they weren't afraid of the dark.